Palestine will die in the next 190 years or so. This is a geopolitical inevitability, and I have two arguments to support it. 1. The history of increased international condemnation towards Israel repeatedly coincides with the continuous increase in settlement numbers and violence, followed by a period of perceived supposed stagnation of said violence and settlement numbers, which is then only followed by another period of increased numbers. There is no reduction period along the way. And international condemnation seems to actually embolden the Zionist occupiers to enact even further violence. Never did Israel take any effort to reduce the number of settlements in any meaningful way, and the country never dealt with any tangible consequence for what it has been doing, indicating it will continue to never reduce settlement numbers. Let me walk you through it. 1967, the 6 Days War saw the beginning of the official occupation of the West Bank, Gaza, and the Golan Heights, which was the noticeable settlement increase period. Between 67 and 76, however, there was a small number of settlements, and they were partially non-militarized, which could be called a perceived settlement stagnation period. 1977, Begin gets to power. A more ideological pro-settlement policy is implemented, aligned with the Jewish nationalist movement of this name. Carter and Reagan both condemned settlement construction as an obstacle to peace. Multiple UN resolutions on the matter, including the famous Resolution 446 from 1979, were passed, but settlement numbers nearly tripled anyways. 1993 to 2000 was the Oslo period. There was increased diplomacy. The Oslo Accords created optimism for peace and a two-state solution. Many people expected settlement activities to slow or to freeze. However, settlements expanded significantly not just before or after the period, but during it, from roughly 110,000 settlers in 1993 to over 190,000 by 2000 in the West Bank alone. The EU and the UN sharply criticized the expansion as contrary to the spirit of Oslo. The Clinton administration formally opposed new settlements but continued strong aid and diplomatic support for Israel. From 2000 to 2008, the occupation was mostly silent and with no internationally noticeable uptake in violence, and thus not much international condemnation. It was a perceived settlement stagnation period, but continuous settlement construction brought the settlements to nearly 300,000 in numbers. 2009, Benjamin returns to power with renewed settlement construction. The Obama administration publicly clashed with Israel over settlement plans in East Jerusalem in 2010 and in 2012. In 2016, the UN Security Council passed Resolution 2334, reaffirming that Israeli settlements were in fact illegal. 1 year later, the Trump administration came into power and they effectively legitimized settlements, recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital and rejecting the idea that settlements violated international law. The Abraham Accords came in 2020, and there was this false sense of renewed hope for a resolution at a time where settlement numbers went over 400,000. We didn't hear much about the matter for a while, and then in 2023, the Gaza genocide started. Openly publicized violence increased. Israel announced plans for thousands of new housing units. Over 70,000 people were killed in Gaza, and over 1,000 were killed in the West Bank at the very least. And today, 2026, a supposed ceasefire is in place. Bombings continue, the Gazans sleep on tents flooded by rain this winter, while Trump's peace plan is set to turn Gaza into a strip mall for profit. We are currently in the perceived settlement stagnation period, and it is only a matter of time until a new uptake in publicized violence and a more publicized settlement period begins. settlements, be it in the West Bank or in Gaza. Amid sanctions, international threats, international court rulings, and increased condemnation, there were never any signs to suggest the state would ever even remotely consider rolling back on the settlements. Israel is an expert at controlling the narrative by presenting the notion that everything is chill, as if there's nothing to be seen here as the settlements continue to expand. The state actively pushes the international eyes away and then moves into periods of more ideologically inclined settlement, with increased violence that is then publicized relentlessly, almost as if to say, yes, we can do whatever we want, while this publicizing overwhelms foreigners with violence and despair, which paralyzes our response. Once the boots on the ground achieve specific strategic interests, the state then changes into diplomacy mode, where the notion of conflict resolution is portrayed while the sporadic bombings continue and the settlement numbers keep increasing, but this time in the background. Ian Lustig has a book where he describes Israeli policy as creeping annexation through bureaucratic normalization, and that is something you can see by examining this oscillating behavior Israel engaged in by the past 70 plus years, which is an indication of how it will behave in the next 70. The second thought process that allows me to conclude Palestine is going to die is what I like to refer to as the Manchu standard, which can be explained by the following phrase. The historical precedent is that when the national identity of one group of people is consolidated, the national identity of another group of people dies. The birth of a national identity comes at the cost of the erasure of another. Do you know what a Manchu is? If you don't, that's the point. The reason I said Palestine has 190 years left is because it took only 268 years for the Manchu to go from a minority who came to rule the whole of China to an insignificant minority that the general public does not even know of, and an ethnicity that doesn't have a country of their own. Even though I cannot pretend this time frame is anything other than anecdotal, I think this 268 years mark can be used as a rule of thumb to conceptualize how long it takes for a national identity to be erased or changed. I have an old unlisted video going into more details about this, and I'll link it in the description below, but the book Imagined Communities by Benedict is something that helped me come to these conclusions. In this book, Benedict defined a nation as an imagined political community, both inherently limited and sovereign. So in essence, what I call the Manchu standard is the fact that national identity is a malleable thing that comes and goes. Nationality is an idea shaped by the strategic interests of any given ruling class at the time of foundation of a country. This is a little beside the point, but it is of my belief that nationalism is an illusion. It is inherently unnatural, and nationality is not tied to the land we inhabit or even our blood. Nationality is tied to the myth of the nation-state and to the physical, governmental, and societal structures that collectively allow the state and the myth to exist. What does that mean to Palestine? There is a reason when you look at France, you do not think of a Breton or a Corsican. There is a reason when you look at China, you do not think of a Manchu. And there is a reason why when you look at the Baltic states, you do not think of Sambian, Scalovian, or Nadruvian people. The same way I can assure you, as a foreigner, we do not think of the Navajo or the Iroquois whenever we look at North America. The reason for all of that is genocide, death, and destruction are part of the course for nation building. A nationality needs enemies to target and victims to make in order to be constructed. Sometimes the victims themselves are the ones nation building, but more often than not, the oppressors are the ones who get to dictate how the history of the land is going to be told. What we saw with the formation of Israel is the birth of a nationality that from the get-go was rooted in the idea of conquering the land and subjugating the people in it. By Palestine is going to die, what I'm saying is that it will cease to exist as a state. The Palestinian people will remain subjugated, segregated, and silenced, because the formation of Israel follows the same precedent of the formation of the United States, Spain, Russia, or any other nation. A precedent that says the need to fight an enemy is the number one justification for the birth and the preservation of the national identity. When a national identity is formulated, another is erased. But at the same time, the national identity that is being erased is never as consolidated than it is at the time of erasure. The Gaelic identity, for example, has never been more well defined than it was at the time they were kicked out of mainland Europe and then subjugated to British rule for hundreds of years until it became a shell of what it once was. Similarly, Jewish identity has never been more consolidated and defined than at the time it was facing imminent erasure during the Holocaust. The Zionist movement brought along the Israeli identity, a national identity consolidated at the cost of the erasure of Palestinian identity, which has also never been more consolidated and defined than it is now at the time of imminent erasure. The violent consolidation of a national identity will always have victims, and unless that violence is met with a decisive and even greater violent response, there is nothing that you can do to stop that. Violent, aggressive national consolidation has historically only been stopped by violent, defensive national consolidation. We even saw this with Pan-Arabism, an identity that tried to consolidate itself, and it was promptly killed by force, or even Bahathism, which in a way is an Arab secular identity that also did not survive the test of time, or in other words, it did not survive the test of violent American imperialism. The only thing that could even remotely have a chance at stopping Israel is state jihad, meaning all of the Middle East coming together and killing close to 10 million Israelis, which is simply never going to happen. And if an attempt was ever made, the West wouldn't simply sit back and allow that to happen, meaning there really is no appropriate response to this. The Arab states do not even see the issue as a religious or ethnic one either. Saudi Arabia is notorious for seeing it as just another Iranian-Israeli proxy war. There is no white savior, and there is no Muslim savior coming to rescue Palestine, and there surely is no amount of diplomacy or international condemnation that could ever stop Israel. I'm not pretending I have a solution for this or a course of action, but I really do believe that with everything that has been happening in the world, if you are an anti-imperialist, the word violence should be a more recurrent part of your vocabulary and of your ideological goals, because the force of capital is not the only thing you are standing up against. You are standing against history. You are standing against historical precedents that show Israelis are never going to stop it themselves. Americans are never going to stop it themselves. The oligarchs that rule the world are not simply going to stop it all themselves. And the longer their hearts keep beating and their brains keep receiving oxygen, the only thing that stops is human decency. The only thing that stops is Palestinian existence.
Due to personal reasons, I am now evil. And I am telling you that the power that I hold and me going evil, there ain't nobody that's got a fucking chance against me.